So, hello everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment podcast, in partnership as ever with our good friends over at Operation Smile. Now, as my colleague Rose has mentioned, we're delighted to welcome Markus onto the podcast today. So hopefully you can still hear and see me okay, Markus?
Yes. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for having me, Paul.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to it. We've got a good range of questions lined up for you today. Hopefully, won't be too taxing for you, but I know it'll be something that the listeners are going to get a lot of inspiration from, and hopefully talk a bit about your background and how you've got to where you are today. So, it should be a nice interview today, I hope.
Awesome. No, thanks for having me. I'm really grateful. You have a fantastic show, and listen to some of the former episodes. It's really very worthwhile to listen in. So thanks for having me here.
Perfect. Well, no, it's really going to be interesting, and I think obviously I mentioned myself, and then Rose has mentioned this also, that the podcast being in partnership with Operation Smile. For any of the listeners who don't know, they're a medical charity that help children born in developing countries who are born with cleft lip and cleft palate. So it's a cause that's very close to my heart personally, but also to EMEA. And I thought, to start the podcast in a light-hearted way, given that the connection with Operation Smile, I thought it'd be good to ask you what the last thing made you smile was, Markus.
Well, I think this was just a few minutes ago, Paul. I sit here in the basement of my home office. And before starting this conversation with you, I went upstairs to get a cup of coffee. And this is where I saw my son. He's 14 months old, and he makes now his first baby steps. So he walked towards me, really proud that he can now walk. He falls down once in a while, but still he gets up and walks again. And so I really enjoy seeing him, and he makes me smile. He's a true sunshine in life. So I think this was really enjoyable. And obviously a lot of things happened in the pandemic, and the pandemic has taken a huge toll on people. But I think if there's one upside, I think then it's working from home gives us the opportunity to spend more time with family. So I really enjoy spending time with my boys. And so, this was the last thing that made me smile.
No, excellent. I mean, that's a great example to give. And I think obviously, you've mentioned there that clearly yourself, like everybody, has had this challenge of the COVID situation that we've all faced. But what I like about it is you put a positive slant on things. I mean, it's normally a question I actually ask leading into the podcast of the guests, really, to try and put a positive angle on what we've been through in the last 2 years. But it seems like you've beaten me to it and already addressed that. I mean, would you say you're generally a very positive person in nature naturally?
Yeah, I like to be very optimistic in outlook. I once in a while too optimistic, but I rather prefer to be overly optimistic than overly pessimistic. And I think there's so many opportunities that we can tap in. So it always depends a little bit on how you want to have a look at life. And so I think from my point of view, life is short and I want to make the most out of it. So that's a little bit of what guides me, I think, in my life.
I mean, it's interesting because I guess nobody would really argue that that's the best way of looking at life. I mean, I think generally, if everybody could look at life that way and have that positive mindset, then the world and everyone individually would be in a better frame of mind. But as we all know, not everybody is like that, and some people find that harder than others to get to that point of view. So, is it something that comes naturally to you, or did you have to work on this? I was wondering if there's any sort of let's say origin for where this approach comes from, really, Markus.
But I think in my case, I think I was somehow gifted with it. I grew up as such. My mother told me that I was always a pretty happy child, and maybe I was also lucky in life. So I cannot complain at all. I've been really lucky in my own life. And then I think on top of that, I think really having these moments with reflecting about what life offers you, I think has helped. Being really grateful for what we get, what I get, I think is something that I would recommend everyone to practice. I think, it just makes one more satisfied with life. So that's a little bit of what I do, reflecting on all the positive things that we all experience these days. So again, certainly there are moments where I think you experience like setbacks in life, health issues and their life. And I definitely acknowledge that this is taking a huge toll on people. For example, my father-in-law suffers from a severe disease, a lung disease, and certainly this is taking a huge toll on him and also the entire family. But overall, I think, life is short, and I think as you look into what you can do, what you can achieve in life, I think just making the most out of it is helpful.
No, and I think on that, you've touched there on the empathetic nature that you had as well. And I think that the combination of being positive and empathetic are two, I would say, key character traits of anybody looking to have a successful HR career, no matter what part of HR you're in. It's obviously a very human-centered discipline. And I think if you've got strong empathy and you have a positive mindset, then clearly it's going to help in your interactions with individuals on a day-to-day basis. So I thought, obviously, a lot of the questions we have are related to how you've got to where you are now and the accolades you've had getting towards that point. But I thought I'd just ask you, why HR in the first place? Because obviously, some people when they graduate, they know what they want to do, very focused to get to that point. But then others almost fall into their career through luck, as you mentioned there, or through circumstance. So I wondered how HR came around for you. Was it something you've always wanted to do? Was it a chance meeting or a bizarre situation that took you in this path?
Yeah, I certainly wanted to work in a corporation. I had my own company, my startup, when I was a teenager. I sold radio-controlled airplanes and toys via eBay and Amazon back in the days when the margins were slightly better than today. And so I think this is why I was keen to work in an organization. I knew how to operate a small company, wanted to learn how a large organization operates, and this is why I joined a multinational. And then I think within the multinational, I completed a rotation program. And I ran into a leader who really inspired me, who kind of took me under his wings and gave me lots of opportunities to grow and challenge myself. And this happened to be within the HR function. So that's how I ended up in HR. I think I could also ended up in finance or in other disciplines, but I think just the leader who I had the pleasure to work with and inspired me kind of helped me then to then start and build a career in HR. And as I was so lucky getting the support in the beginning of my career, now I also feel an obligation, an opportunity to give back. And that's why I think I enjoy my work even more. Just also help other people to establish themselves, have a career in an organization, but also in human resources.
Mm-hmm. No, really interesting, and you often find that that's the case, that an experience working with a mentor or a leader can have a big impact on an individual and shape their career, because they want to try and either emulate or better what they've seen and take things from there. And I mean, obviously, as a leader yourself, given that you moved into HR from the experience you had with a leader, and I thought it'd be good to ask you what you feel are some of the most important skills that a leader should embody to be successful.
Yeah, I think there are many skills that come to mind, but I think as I think specifically about 2022, I think we still find ourselves in the midst of the pandemic, about 2 years in. So I think one skill that leaders really need this year, they also needed in the past, but I think this year specifically is like really listening to learn, listening to build trust, listening also to make people feel valued, feel heard. Listening to learn new things. I think listening to me is a superpower. And I think you're in recruitment, Tom. So, it's also like listening to make people feel valued. I think McKinsey just released the latest findings of their study, and that suggested that a lack of feeling valued is the number one reason for people to resign. So I think really making sure that people feel valued, feel listened is really, really critical. We live in a world now where I think also research suggests that the attention spans dropped significantly. So I think the scientists even reckon that I think we have shorter attention spans than goldfish. I'm not sure if that's true, but certainly I think all struggle to pay attention, to listen. And so this is why I think listening is a powerful skill for leaders. And I think it's not only important at work. I think being a better listener also helps with other relationships, with a partner, with children, with friends. And certainly my wife reminds me when she thinks that I'm no longer listening enough. So that's certainly a powerful skill to practice.
That's always good as a reminder, from your wife to keep on the listening skills. So that's good. And I think it is it's one of those skills that, I mean, you obviously interview a number of people over the course of an average year, as do I. And I think when you usually ask people for their key skills or what they can bring to the table, it's quite rare that people will say they are a good listener, and it's either because they don't necessarily think of that as being a great skill, or it's not something they regard maybe as within themselves. But I think it is, as you mentioned, it's so difficult these days to really hone in on that skill. I mean, you have all kinds of social media, you have everything trying to grab your attention with the personalized marketing that you get on things like Facebook and YouTube now, that everyone's trying to get your attention as quickly as possible. And I guess linked into that, we also now have the impact of BI and data on our work lives as well, and I wondered, given that you're very people focused, and listening, as you mentioned, is a key skill of that and of high importance for you. But those kind of areas are maybe not so aligned with areas of BI and data, because the two things kind of conflict in some ways with the systems and sitting in front of a desk and analyzing data versus meeting with people and listening. So I thought I'd ask you how you feel the HR function is going to change in the future as the influence of BI and data increases, which it's inevitably will, really.
Yeah, no, I think intuition and empathy can really be nicely complemented with data, right? Because I think the intuition and empathy helps you to build hypotheses, and then you can look at data and really understand, is this true or is it not true? And so I think I'm really keen to understand key talent trends. And I think there's a lot happening these days. Now with the pandemic, some trends are even accelerated. So picking up the signals very early from the marketplace, I think is really critical. In my work, we call it an insights engine, talent insights, a talent intelligence engine with labor market data to really stay on top of what's happening in the marketplace, in key markets like the US, in key skills. So I think that's tremendously helpful. And I think looking at this data and then also combining it with the experience of our recruiters and talent scouts who work closely with talent on a daily basis helps us to really identify strategic risks, but also strategic opportunities. And we bring them to senior management regularly to then facilitate a conversation informed by data to make more data-driven decisions. So I think this works from my perspective pretty well. And the entire talent strategy is now really built around making talent decisions more in a data informed way, more transparent, more democratic. So I fully agree with your perspective, Paul. That's a major trend to be continued, and we probably will spend even more time on really exploring data to mine insights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. It's very interesting how things are now, and you can see the way companies recruit now is gradually having more and more that influence on BI and data as well. I think it's changing the interview process for job seekers. It's changing the decision-making process for clients, and I think it's obviously a learning curve, like everything is when a new idea comes through. And I think you are seeing things improve over a short period of time. But it's going to be interesting to see how things are in 5-10 years time when it comes to this whole talent approach. And I think you mentioned earlier that you've seen a number of trends related to talent in the markets, and we've touched on one with the BI and data. I didn't know, are there any other trends that you see in the marketplace around talent at the moment?
Well, I think another one is, mobility. I think we talked about the pandemic earlier. I think this has really changed the perspective of people, how they want to live their life, where they want to live their life. So I think I've seen lots of studies published by Boston Consulting Group and others that I think mobility, the willingness to relocate, dropped significantly in the US, in China. Japan, I think, was always historically low, but I think is even lower today, but also across a number of Western European countries. I think that's also a key trend. And I think it's important for leaders, for business leaders, HR leaders to really think through how they can continue to stay on top of the game, how they can cast a wider net to reach talent, how they can offer more flexibility where, when, and how people work. So I think that's certainly a key focus area. And again, a trend that I think has started already pre-pandemic, but I think has accelerated during the pandemic, and I think is here to stay, that people are slightly less willing to relocate for career opportunities. Once in a while they may do, but I think on the aggregate, I think that's something that we all need to consider.
No, I think it is right what you're saying. I mean, it's something we've seen as well, and I think what's happened also over the last few years is that there's much more emphasis now placed on the values and ethics and the culture of businesses than probably what there was before. Whilst these things have always been very important, what we've seen now is these questions are being asked by the job seekers early on in the process, whereas actually maybe before the whole COVID situation, it was something that was asked after the second or third interview more in that way. And so I think it's important and the companies have realised that as well, that the image they present, whether it's around diversity and inclusion, whether it's about sustainability, culture and values, is what now brings a lot of the great talent to the organisation. And I guess one of the questions I had is linked to that as well, because obviously, we're talking about attracting and retaining great talent into an organisation, and clearly Novartis has a great track record of doing that. So I thought I'd ask you what steps you think have been vital to your successes in that area, and how you managed to have this efficient and effective recruitment process, really.
Yeah, no, I think with great pleasure. And I think tying it to what you just mentioned, I think the purpose of why people do what they do, I think is really critical, becoming more important. And as a matter of fact, I think Novartis is a leading healthcare company, and the purpose is to reimagine medicine, which basically means innovating new and better medicine for people across a number of disease areas. Think cancer, think multiple sclerosis, and the like. And I think this certainly helps us to attract talent to join the industry. Not only talent that works maybe in a lab as a scientist and the traditional roles, but also accessing new talent segments that we need more of. We talked about data, digital. I think attracting these talent cohorts, I think, is really, really critical. So being really clear about the purpose and communicating it out in a clear and concise and simple way has worked really well. I think the culture that you find at Novartis is very, very appealing. It's centered around inspired, curious, and unbossed. And I can tell you, I work here for 1.5 years, and it's an amazing experience. People are so driven to make a contribution towards reimagining medicine, learning every day. And I can say, I think that's possibly also one of the key reasons why we see lots of people being interested to join. And lastly, I think we talked also about the notion of flexibility. People want to have a balance between work and life. And Novartis put in place a policy around how people can make more decisions about where, when, and how they want to work. We call it choice with responsibility. And it is also tremendously important to a lot of the people that I talk with, because they really want to have this balance of work and life and getting it right. And so that has helped, I think, quite a bit in recent years to be seen as one of the top employers in the industry and even across industries.
I mean, how did you find implementing that? I mean, I know you mentioned you've been there for about 1.5 years, so I suppose, the start of this might have happened before you joined, but still, you're obviously heavily involved in this this initiative of the flexible working and so on, because I think that's something that a lot of companies have really struggled with. I mean, I think it's very difficult to get a policy that everybody is happy with, and so it almost sounds like the degree of flexibility Novartis has is the key to its success. Is that a fair comment, or is there something else behind it, do you think?
Yeah, Paul, I won't tell you that it's easy. So I think it's certainly not. It's certainly not. And I think it's a journey. And the journey started, even as you said, far before I joined. So I can't take too much credit. But I think what has worked really, really well is then to contextualize this flexibility within specific teams and specific environments. Flexibility looks different for people who work in shop floor versus people who may work in a lab and people who may work in an office-based environment. So I think you need to look into the specific context. What has really worked well here is what we call the how conversation. So a leader facilitating a conversation with the team to co-create together how they want to work and how they want to basically make the best contributions to the success of the company. And so it's basically roughly a 2-hour conversation centered around questions. How can we stay connected? How do we get the most out of collaboration and the like? And then the team makes firm commitments of how the team wants to work together. This can include agreements that they may want to come to the office on a specific workday, whatever, on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, on whatever cadence, weekly, bi-weekly, or the like, or other kind of commitments that go beyond. But this has worked well. And I think we also looked at teams who have had this conversation, this deliberate dialogue around how they want to work versus other teams who did not. And data proves that there's an 8% increase in the team members' ability to express their needs and feel psychological safety, but also the leaders benefit hugely. So we see a 10% increase of team leaders' ability to manage work-related stress. So having this conversation, being clear on our expectations and agreeing on some tangible kind of next step has worked out really, really well here in the context. So that's something that I want to encourage. Again, it takes courage to have this conversation. It's a little bit of an effort to facilitate the conversation, but it's tremendously valuable. And so I have seen this being implemented in many teams across the world. And this has helped teams to work even better together.
It's really interesting because in that answer there, if you like, you've touched on a lot of the things we were talking about in terms of the approach that you have. So you obviously, by asking a how focused question, clearly that is moving towards where the other person has to listen, because if you're asking this open-ended question, to get the most from that meeting, the person who is asking the question then needs to listen very closely to the answers and try to arrange the right action moving forward. But then also, you've got the stats for the success of it, whether it's the success of individuals, the success of managers, what percentage of improvement has happened through having this meeting, which obviously then links to things like the BI and data side of things. So it's almost the two different approaches coming together well for a great solution, really. So it's good example to give, I think, there.
Yeah, it has worked out, and I think this is also giving managers who may feel slightly less sure about this way forward. I think it encourages them to give it a try and also explore. And I think it has worked out. It has worked out really, really well. And I think it's then obviously also worthwhile to have another kind of conversation after a certain while to look at how we really lived up to what we agreed as a team. Where do we may need to course correct? Maybe new team members come and join the team. So I think it's worthwhile to do this check-in once in a while, just to look back what has worked, what hasn't worked, and then iterate moving forward. So having this practice of regular dialogue within the teams, how people want to work, is something that I guess will be super critical also moving forward, because I think gone are the days when people come to an office 5 days a week. So we need to iterate a little bit how we work and are productive.
Mm. No, and it's something we see a lot, I mean, in terms of the different approaches that companies have. I mean, if you look at, I mean, the companies we work with in Switzerland, there are a handful of businesses that have a similar approach to Novartis on this, but then there are also a handful of companies that still want to insist that their teams are in the office physically five days a week, because the managers are in 5 days a week, so they expect the teams to be in then. But it's very challenging, because what works, as you said yourself, what works for one person doesn't work for another. So if you enjoy being in the office 5 days a week, you get the most out of everything, and you're happy on that side, then that's fine for one person. But because they're happy about it doesn't mean to say that if they want the best people coming in, they need to think more around what makes the team happy, and everything connects. If the team are happy, then they get better results, which also means everybody's happy around that as well. And I think one of the things I've noticed about yourself, Markus, is every time we've spoken, you've always had a huge smile on your face. You're very positive about life and your time so far at Novartis. It's still very early days, but clearly everything you've been talking about so far is having an impact on yourself personally, and you're seeing this all firsthand. So I thought I'd ask you what it feels like to be in this position, in the global HR talent leader at Novartis. I mean, how do you feel being in this role at the moment?
Well, I'm super, super happy, I must say, Paul. I think it's an amazing privilege to be the head of talent at Novartis. And as you think me, there's always like 4 P's that come to mind as I think about my work, what I do. And I think the first one is purpose. I think working in a purpose-driven healthcare company and making contributions towards innovating new medicine is very rewarding. My father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer and COPD, which is a lung disease, and so it gives me a lot of meaning to do this work and hopefully contribute to innovate new medicines for the future. I think the second P is around the people. I have the privilege to work with a fantastic team, people with very diverse backgrounds, distributed all around the world, but I think all united with the passion to make contributions towards reimagining medicine to make the world a better place. And so they're fantastic people in the team, and it's just a great joy to see them and interact with them regularly. I think the third piece is certainly around the position. When you work in talent, you work with a lot of amazing people in the business. Also external candidates that you once in a while interview and get to know. So I think that's, to me, always a huge inspiration to see where they are, what they contribute today, but also help them to prepare themselves for even larger responsibilities in the future. So that's a really enjoyable role. And the last P is, I would say, the place. I have been lucky. I lived in amazing places in my life. But Switzerland is certainly also one of the best places I've had the pleasure to come across. And you have, like, obviously the nature, but you also have like the woods, this healthcare, the safety. It's amazing to live here. And we discussed in an earlier conversation that I have a family. I have 2 boys. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I think living here in Switzerland with small children is amazing. So I certainly recommend this place if you would ever consider. Obviously not you because you live here, but if some of your listeners wonder where they could possibly move to in the future, I would put Switzerland on top of the list of places that are certainly worthwhile to be explored, to live there, or at the minimum to travel here and explore the country and the people and the food.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's a wonderful place to be, and I think the quality of life is well reported. But I think the reality is that it does live up to expectations on that side. It's very what I see is it. When people are on the job market and then, let's say, they're based in Switzerland, but they say maybe they're flexible on opportunities outside of Switzerland. When the reality comes around and they are looking at other jobs in other countries, it's very difficult to emotionally move away from Switzerland because of the great quality of life that's there, and it's very hard to compare that to many other countries, certainly in Europe. So a great place to be. And I think you mentioned there, obviously you've traveled the world almost as part of your career. There aren't many countries that you've not had some exposure to, but you've lived in a range of different countries as well. I mean, is that something that you always wanted to do as part of your role, and also within that, obviously when you're relocating, there's a risk element involved. So, are you quite sort of quite positive in terms of, making these big life-changing choices to relocate and go into different places? So I thought I'd ask you, what you gained really from all the travel that you've done over the years.
Yeah, no, I think I reflected about this a lot, and I grew up in a very humble environment with a lot of love, but I haven't traveled the world much. I think I left my home country, Germany, when I was 12 for the first time, so I haven't traveled much. When I compared it with my children, they've been in many different places, especially pre-pandemic. But I think to me, I haven't seen much, and I still remember when I had my first kind of vacation outside of my home country in Italy, how fascinated I was by people speaking another language and getting different food and drinks and all this kind of inspiration that you get when things are different. I think I was so excited about exploring the world afterwards that I always decided to go for jobs that gave me an opportunity to be exposed to different cultures. For example, after my university studies, I even moved into IT, which was not necessarily my first choice, but in the IT function, there was a global project to bring new processes and systems to many different countries. And so it was a global rollout job. And I was really totally fascinated by the opportunity to get to so many different countries and travel the world and get to know people. And so I have always been willing to take a risk. I didn't want to regret and miss out on an opportunity. So this is why I decided to go for bigger jobs, and also jobs that pushed myself out of my comfort zone. There have been moments when I was, I think, really stretched and overly stretched and really tired. And I always wonder, Markus, why have you done what you have done? But I think over time, I think I recovered, and I would again certainly recommend to go for it, and just give it a try. Right? I think we all grow with being exposed to larger responsibilities, big tasks, uncharted territory, and so I think this has worked well for me. But there have been moments when I felt really, really stretched and struggled. But this is the pain that might be needed to learn and grow as well. It's not painless. There is a little bit of pain involved, I guess.
No, it is, and I think that having that risk approach is obviously works very, very well for you. I mean, you've seen a lot of the world. You're doing remarkably well in your career. You have a wife, two boys. So everything is falling nicely into place. But as you say, it doesn't. What people often don't see behind that are some of the dark days you've obviously had over the period of time. I think everybody does. If you do take a few risks here and there and move outside your comfort zone, then you are going to have a number of times through a year where there is some doubt and you do worry about whether you've made the right choice on it. But it's probably better to make that choice than not do it, so you don't have any regrets on the choices you make. And I think that's one of the big areas that I've been reading into recently about regrets. I think there was one book I read, the top 5 regrets of the dying, and whilst it was quite a difficult book to read, it really brings home that actually it's much better to try these things out and live without the regret of not doing it than to not do it and then be too old or incapable to do these kind of things. And I guess linked into this quite nicely, I know you follow Daniel Pink on your LinkedIn page, and we actually had the pleasure of Daniel on the podcast a few weeks ago as well, and he's got a new book coming out next month about the power of regrets, and where he's interviewed thousands of people across the globe about their biggest regret in life, and had almost a discussion around what it was, how if they could go back and change things, what they would do, and I thought, given that the conversation's kind of led quite nicely in that area, I thought I might ask you, is there a particular regret that you have at this current stage in your life or career that you're maybe working to remedy, or I thought that could be a good question to ask you, really.
There's certainly one thing coming to my mind. I mentioned earlier that even before starting in a large scale multinational, I had my own small startup company in the early 2000s, and I was an entrepreneur, and I sold radio controlled toys and other things on the internet. And I kind of regretted a little bit that I gave up this small business. Obviously, it was very risky, and obviously the prospect of working for a large multinational and learning how business is done on a large scale was very, very compelling. But in hindsight, once in a while, I think, like, Markus, why haven't you continued to operate as an entrepreneur? You could have possibly also grown your business. My business started in the early 2000s. I don't suggest that the business will be as large and successful as Amazon or Zalando, but I think there would be probably one or the other niche that you could operate in, and you could also be pretty successful as an entrepreneur. So I love entrepreneurship. I always love to work with people who found a business, like yourself, Paul, by the way. I think with EMEA Recruitment, I think I just love the energy of people who are optimistic to explore an opportunity. That's maybe the one regret that I feel. And now these days, a lot about digital, and I think back in the days I had 30,000 newsletter subscriptions in the early 2000s. So I think that would have been an opportunity to scale it over time. That's the one thing that I may regret from a business context. And then maybe one of the other things that I regret, I've made some investment decisions. Like, it certainly told me, Markus, you're not a good investor. So so I think there's some other regrets that we can talk about as well. But I think in terms of business context, I think it's maybe that I'm no longer an entrepreneur. But you never know, maybe in the future there might be an opportunity to operate as an entrepreneur again. So there are a few more years between now and retirement, and let's see what the future holds.
No, indeed, yeah. There's never going to be too late to reignite that entrepreneurial side that you have. Let's say the chapter left open in your book at the moment. And I mean, to be honest, also even if you didn't get that opportunity to reopen it again, at least you have given it a try. Earlier on in your career, so you can at least say, well, there's a tick next to that box for starting it, although maybe you didn't follow it through as much as you might have wanted or wished to, but it is better to have given it a try. And as you say, there's still plenty of opportunity to do that as well. So I know the last question I had for you, I mean, it's related to your career in HR, because through the conversation we talked about the people that have influenced you. We've talked about how you brought in great talent into not just Novartis but through your career, and the things you really value in your own approach as well as others. And obviously one of the things that stands out about your background is the amount of accolades that you've had as well. I mean, it was last year you were recognized as a top HR talent manager, you were top HR influencer, top 50 leaders reinventing the world. And there's so many accolades that you have against your name now. There's probably not enough space on the LinkedIn profile to put them all in. And I think it's one of those things that I guess, a lot of people would like to go in that direction, either with their career or their discipline. But I was wondering how you how you achieve these, because whether it was something actually you wanted to do, or whether it just happened because of the work you're already doing. So I thought I'd be interested just to find out a bit about your plan as to how you got these accolades and got involved in these areas, really.
Thanks for asking, Paul. I feel really humbled and also grateful for these recognitions. And honestly speaking, I was also a little bit surprised by them. I think of myself more as somebody who still has a lot to learn and is still work in progress. And by the end of the day, I think these are not necessarily always individual recognitions, but also a reflection of the people that I had the chance to work with in my life, to learn from in business school, but also in companies like Boehringer, Merck, PepsiCo, and also now Novartis. There are fantastic people at Novartis I can learn from. So I think that's a little bit of what coined me, and I would say, being willing to share my point of view, engage in a conversation. I use LinkedIn quite a bit to share my points of view and articulate myself how I see the world. And I think I get fantastic feedback from the community to iterate my own thinking, improve my thinking, and so that's certainly something that I would encourage people to consider, just to be bold and share their points of view on the world, on things, and then see how other people respond. And I get great input. I get great comments and also constructive challenges. I say, hey, Markus, I disagree. I see things differently. And this helps me to iterate my own thinking. And so, I think hopefully we can continue to do great work and hopefully with impact at the workplace, but also hopefully with a little bit of an opportunity to inspire others how good can look like when it comes to, for example, reskilling, upskilling the workforce. I think that's a need that you do not only see in my specific workplace. That's a need that I see broadly, and I think that's also something that matters to society with the digital transformation, possibly putting certain jobs at risk. So how can we think about reskilling, upskilling the organization? What are the skills that we will need in the future? How can we help people to get from where they are today with the skill set that they have today to the skill sets that they need tomorrow to remain employable? So I think these are some of the questions that we need to think through. And this is where I would love to see that people across companies come together to shape the thinking to the benefit of the people within the organization, but also society more broadly.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I think it sounds like I was going to ask you what the next thing in your pipeline is, but I think you pretty much just answered that. That's a big project to be working on for some time, I think, Markus. There,
yeah. I think it's not going to get any easier to crack, so to say, this notion of strategic workforce planning and capability building and skilling of the organization. I think that's a big one. I have exchanges with people from other organizations of how one could possibly tackle that. I think we have some recipes that tend to work in some parts of the organization. We try to scale them, but we're also eager to learn from others. So if anybody is listening here in this webcast and is curious to exchange more, I would be happy to receive a message on LinkedIn and exchange more. And just to exchange ideas to see how could we possibly look into this question and come up with simple and tangible solutions that meet business needs, but also really help people all around the world to keep their skills where they need to be.
No, and what we'll do, obviously, when we put the podcasts on LinkedIn, we'll make sure that we've got the link to your page, and so it makes it easy for people to connect with you also on that side. So, I mean, I guess all that's really left for me to say, Markus, is a huge thanks for coming on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed it. It's been really inspirational. Great to hear about your background, your approach to HR, the listening, the empathy, obviously how great Novartis have done over what has been a number of challenging years for everybody, you know, and I know, yeah, great congratulations for you as well with the birth of your second child. I know it was about a year ago now, but I know I was saying off air, you're looking remarkably well for someone who's got a 1-year-old. So it's so it's good. It's a good tick in the box next to the Novartis plan of flexible working, I think.
Yeah, I was lucky. Last night was a good one, but it can look very different tomorrow. So it was so great, Paul, to speak with you. Thanks so much for having me. Your show is fantastic. Thanks for all the inspiration. Really genuinely appreciate it, and keep it up. I'm really eager to tune in future sessions and episodes and listen to you and also the guests, and be inspired how the world evolves.
Oh, excellent. No, thank you again for being here and your kind words, Markus. Really appreciate it. And we'll keep in touch and stay safe in the meantime, man.
Thanks. Take care, Paul. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.